All right. Today, we are tackling credit scores.
Yeah, sounds good.
It's something that I feel like a lot of people stress about.
Right.
More specifically, how to work that system to our advantage and unlock those super prime perks.
Right.
You know, the ones I'm talking about where lenders are practically begging to give you money at amazing interest rates, of course.
It's true. Having a good credit score can really open doors. It's really about understanding how lenders think. Because ultimately, they're the ones that are using that score to make decisions.
Exactly.
And so if you can put yourself in their shoes a little bit, then a lot of the pieces of the puzzle start to fall into place.
Totally.
Lenders, they look at credit scores to figure out how risky it is to lend to you. A super prime rating, usually we're talking 720 or above that, tells them, hey, this person's a safe bet.
Right.
And what do you get for being a safe bet? The best possible terms on things like mortgages, auto loans, even credit cards. We could be talking about saving tens of thousands of dollars over the life of a loan just because you have a good score.
Okay, so high credit score equals major financial wins. Got it. But how do they even come up with that score? What are the big things we should be focusing on?
So it really boils down to 5 main factors. The most important one by far is your payment history. We're talking 35% of your score hinges on this one.
So like paying your bills on time, that's actually a big deal.
It really is. It's the foundation of a good credit score. Even messing up a little bit, like missing a payment here or there, it can really hurt you more than you might think. And that's why I always say setting up auto pay or at least some kind of reminder on your phone, it can be a lifesaver. Really takes the guesswork out of it.
Yeah, for sure.
If you're only going to focus on one thing for a while,
right,
make it that one.
Make it that one because that's a third of your whole credit score.
It is. And, you know, it makes sense if you think about it from a lender's perspective.
Right.
Right. They want to see that you're reliable.
Right.
That you pay your bills on time. Because that's what a loan is.
Right.
Right. You're saying, I'm going to take this money from you
right,
and I'm going to pay it back.
Right.
According to these terms. And so the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior.
Totally. Okay. So then with payment history then.
Yeah.
So obviously we want to be paying all of our bills on time.
Yes.
But is there anything else that goes into that? Or is it really just like, as long as you're not late, you're good?
So that's a great question. And there's actually a little bit of a nuance there.
Okay.
That a lot of people don't realize.
Okay.
It's not just about paying the bill in full. It's also about the balance that's reported to the credit bureaus.
What do you mean?
So let's say, for example, you have a credit card.
Okay.
And you run it up throughout the month. And then you pay it off in full by the due date.
Right.
Which is great.
Which is what I should be doing.
Which is what you should be doing.
Right.
But let's say your balance is really high right before the due date. That high balance can actually be reported to the credit bureaus.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And that can actually hurt your score.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So even though you're paying it off in full.
That's so interesting.
The fact that that high balance is being reported.
I had no idea.
Can actually work against you.
Wow. Okay. That's good to know.
Yeah.
So what do you do about that?
So a couple things you can do. One is you can try to make more frequent payments.
Okay.
So instead of waiting until right before the due date to pay it off in full,
right?
Maybe make a couple smaller payments throughout the month.
Oh, that's a really good strategy.
That way you're keeping that balance lower.
That's really smart. That's such a good analogy. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to start doing that.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've tackled payment history.
Yes.
Let's move on to amounts owed.
Okay.
Which called credit utilization.
Yes.
What is that?
Okay. So credit utilization basically refers to how much of your available credit you're actually using.
Okay.
So let's say you have a credit card with a $10,000 credit limit and you have a $2,000 balance.
Okay.
That means your credit utilization is 20%.
Okay.
Because you're using $2,000 out of $10,000.
Gotcha.
And so the lower your credit utilization, the better.
Why is that?
Well, again, think about it from a lender's perspective.
Right.
If you're maxing out your credit cards, it can be a sign that you're a little bit overextended financially.
Makes sense.
So lenders are kind of the same way.
That's so true.
They want to see that you're using credit responsibly.
Right.
That you're not in over your head.
Yeah.
And so the lower you can keep that credit utilization, the better.
Okay, so what's a good credit utilization ratio?
Yeah, so generally speaking, you want to try to keep it below 30%.
Okay.
So in that example of the $10,000 credit limit, you want to try to keep your balance below $3,000.
Gotcha.
But obviously lower is always better.
Right, because then it's like, well, what are you even using credit for?
Exactly. Like, if you don't need it, then
you're good.
You're golden.
Okay, so under 30%?
Under 30%, that's a good rule of thumb.
Okay, perfect. Okay, that makes sense.
So yeah, that's credit utilization in a nutshell.
Okay, so we've talked about payment history. We've talked about amounts owed. What's next?
All right, so the next factor is length of credit history.
Okay.
And this one's a little bit trickier because it's not something you can really change overnight.
Right.
Right? It takes time to build a long credit history.
So how important is this one?
It's still pretty important. It accounts for 15% of your score.
Okay, so not as much as payment history.
Right, exactly.
But still something to keep in mind.
Still definitely something to keep in mind. And basically, the longer you've had credit and been using it responsibly, the better.
Because it shows that you're reliable over time.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so we've done payment history, we've done amounts owed, we've done length of credit history. What's next?
Okay, so the next factor is credit mix.
Credit mix, what is that?
So credit mix basically refers to the different types of credit accounts that you have.
Okay.
So you've got your revolving credit.
Like what?
Like credit cards.
Okay.
Right, where you have a credit limit.
Mm-hmm.
And you can kind of borrow as much or as little as you want up to that limit.
Right.
And then you've got installment credit.
Which is like
a car loan or a mortgage.
Right.
Where you borrow a fixed amount of money.
Right.
And you pay it back over a fixed period of time.
Gotcha. Okay. So it's good to have a mix of both of those.
Yeah, ideally you want to have a mix of different types of credit because it shows lenders that you can manage different types of debt.
Okay, that makes sense.
So if you only have credit cards, for example, it might make lenders a little bit hesitant because they might wonder.
Like, do they even know what they're doing?
Yeah, like, can you handle a larger loan?
Right.
Right, with a fixed monthly payment.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
So having a mix of credit just shows that you're a little bit more well-rounded.
It's like diversifying your portfolio, but with credit.
Exactly.
That's nuts.
It's the same concept.
That's really interesting.
Okay.
So yeah, that's credit mix.
Exactly.
Okay, so credit mix checked off the list. Last but not least, we have new credit.
New credit, yes.
Okay, new credit. So every time you apply for new credit, like a credit card or a loan, that generates what's called a hard inquiry on your credit report.
Exactly.
What is that?
So a hard inquiry is basically just a record of when a lender has checked your credit.
Okay.
Because you've applied for some kind of credit.
Okay.
And these hard inquiries, they can actually ding your credit score a little bit.
Why do they do that?
Well, it's basically because it's assigned to lenders that you might be taking on more debt.
Okay.
Which could make you riskier.
That makes sense. So is it bad to apply for new credit?
It's not necessarily bad to apply for new credit.
Okay.
But you just want to be strategic about it.
Okay.
Right. So if you know you're going to be applying for a mortgage in the next few months, you probably don't want to go out and open a bunch of new credit cards.
Right. Because then they're going to be like, whoa, what's going on?
Exactly.
See, so timing is important.
Timing is important. Exactly.
Gotcha.
And generally speaking, it's a good idea to space out your credit applications.
Okay.
By at least 6 months or so.
Okay. So as long as you're not just like constantly applying for new credit,
exactly,
you're probably fine.
Exactly.
Okay. That makes sense. Okay. So we've covered all 5 factors.
Yes.
Payment history, amounts owed, length of credit history, credit mix, and new credit.
Those are the big ones.
Yeah. Is there anything else that goes into your credit score, or is that pretty much it?
So those are the main factors that are used to calculate your credit score.
Okay.
But there's one more thing that I want to mention.
Okay.
That's really important.
What's that?
And that's actually checking your credit report.
Oh, yeah, that's important.
Yeah, it's so important.
I feel like people forget about that.
People forget about it, and they're also sometimes a little bit intimidated by it.
Right.
But it's really not that scary.
Okay.
And it's so important to do.
So how often should you check your credit report?
So you can actually get a free credit report from each of the 3 major credit bureaus.
Which are?
Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion.
Okay.
Once a year.
Once a year. Okay.
So I recommend checking it at least once a year.
Okay.
Just to make sure that everything's accurate.
So basically once from each of the credit bureaus every year.
Exactly.
Okay, got it.
And you can actually stagger them.
Oh, that's a good idea.
So, check one now.
Right.
And then check another one in 4 months.
Oh, that's so smart.
And then another one in 4 months after that.
So you're kind of always on top of it.
Exactly.
That's a really good strategy.
And that way, if there are any errors, you can catch them early on.
Right, because that's the other thing, right? Like you want to make sure that there's nothing inaccurate.
Exactly.
On your credit report.
Exactly, because if there are errors,
right,
they can really hurt you.
Totally. Okay, this has been so helpful. I feel like I learned so much.
Well, good. I'm glad.
I feel like I finally understand how credit scores work.
Awesome.
So thank you for breaking that all down.
Yeah, of course.
And for our listeners who are ready to take control of their credit and boost their scores, where should they start?
Start by checking your credit report.
Easy enough?
It's a great first step.
Awesome. Thanks again.
Of course.
And to our listeners, we'll see you next time for another deep dive.
Goodbye.